Well, good morning. I was noticing all these young people come in looking awful pretty and handsome today, and we're so happy you all could be with us. It mentioned a few moments ago, today the world celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And it was about this time of year, nearly 2,000 years ago, that the Lord, who was buried on Friday, was not in his tomb come Sunday. And it's baffled the world ever since. Most of the Christian world believes that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead. We believe that Jesus rose from the dead. But how much do we believe that he did come forth from the grave? We've heard about it most all of our life. But what can we know about it? How can we know if there's any truth to what we've been told all these years? Romans chapter 1, I'm going to use the English Standard Version. I try not to do this much, but the language is clearer, so I want to use it for this particular lesson. Romans 1, verses 1 through 4, Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus, called to be an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, concerning his Son, who was descended from David according to the flesh. And he was declared to be the Son of God in power, according to the Spirit of holiness, by his resurrection from the dead, that is, Jesus Christ the Lord. What we notice here is the fact that Jesus was declared, he was revealed. God, in essence, said that Jesus is his Son, and the way he chose to do that for the ages was by his resurrection from the dead. Christianity, unlike any other religion, is rooted in history. Because it's rooted in history, its tenets are verifiable. They can be proven as to whether or not the Christian religion is true or false. If a person's willing to take the time and examine the evidence, you can find out whether or not the claims that are made by the Bible about God, about the creation, and about ourselves, you can find out whether or not these things are true. If you're willing to put forth the effort, I've been working on this for about 50 years now, and I'm still working on it. There's a whole lot of things that has to be studied. But it's through these things that we come to believe what we believe. And you know as well as I do, the more we believe, the easier it is for us to live the life we've been called to live. It's faith. And faith is based on some type of evidence. The kind of faith that God approves. Most faith is based on hope, a wish, a desire. I want there to be a resurrection because that means death isn't the end. Well, okay, I understand a person wants there to be a resurrection, but what will want get you? It gets you absolutely nothing. You might find some sort of comfort in this life, but it's not going to be anything that you can stake a claim to, so to speak. There has to be more than just wishful thinking. There has to be evidence. And the Bible is actually filled with evidence, even when it comes to the resurrection of God's Son. Time after time, inspired men set out and proved that the scandal of the cross was negated by the victory of the empty tomb. It was said that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. His friends came and took him out of the tomb and hid the body. And then they told everybody that he raised from the dead. These are just a sampling of Bible verses that deal with that particular subject, that the resurrection of God's Son was indeed a matter of fact and not fiction. Apparently, the Lord knew that there was going to be a lot of claims that the resurrection was not true, and therefore he packed his word with proofs, evidences, by which we can know that he did come forth from the cross. Since Jesus lived, was crucified, and buried. Just think about it logically. Very simple, very logical. Since he lived, was crucified, and was buried. Christian, Jewish, pagan writers all agree. There was a time when people argued that Jesus didn't live. Nobody argues that anymore. The evidence is just absolutely overwhelming. All historians are in full agreement. Jesus lived as a man, and as a man he died. There's no argument anywhere, except for mindless people. There's always mindless people. The question is, therefore, what became of the body of Christ? That's the question that has to be answered rather. Since Jesus lived, he died, he was buried, where's his body today? Historians have been asking that question since he died and was buried. They still attempt to answer it today. And they all come up with one conclusion. And that was that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead. As a matter of fact, more than a few have written that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is proven by more evidence than any other single event in history. This is something most of us aren't aware of, but there are people who have devoted their lifetime to a study of this particular subject. Jesus' body was placed in the tomb on Friday, and when they went back to the tomb on Sunday, the tomb was empty. The question is, what happened to the body? Where did it go? What was done with it? And there are four possible explanations, and just four. Really simple, isn't it? Number one, the body is still buried in some unknown Palestinian grave. It's still over there. It's still on the ground. It's never left the ground. That's one possibility. The second, it was removed by the Lord's enemies. That would be the Jewish authorities. Scribes, the Pharisees, the elders, the hypocrites. They would have stolen the body. That's possible. But is it probable? Number three, it was removed from the tomb by the Lord's friends, the apostles, his disciples. They slipped in there and took the body out of the tomb and hid it and said that he was risen from the dead. And then the fourth possibility, he actually rose from the dead, and now he resides in heaven. It's got to be one of the four. Question is, which one is it? Well, all you got to do is knock them out one at a time. First of all, let's suppose the body is still buried in some unknown Palestinian grave. The key word there is unknown. If anybody knew where it was, you know what they do as good as I do. They go over there and dig it up. They would do tests on it, and they would prove that this is not Jesus Christ. It's got to be unknown, hidden from the world. Well, is that a probability? In Matthew chapter 27 and verse 66, Matthew wrote, so they went. Notice the three words there, so they went. These men who went, these were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They went to Pontius Pilate, the governor, and they said, this man said that he would be raised from the dead. We need you to assign a guard to his grave to make sure that he doesn't come back from the grave. And he said, okay, you've got your guard. You take care of it. He didn't want to. You go take care of it. So they went to take care of it. They made the tomb secure. They made it so nobody could slip in it. He was buried in a tomb that belonged to a man named Joseph. And they made sure that there was no way anyone could slip into this tomb. There was no back doors, there was one door, and they made sure that that door couldn't be penetrated. They made the tomb secure. How did they do it? Two ways. Number one, they sealed the stone. They put a Roman seal on it, a seal that wasn't going to be broken. Number two, they set a guard. There were probably 15 or 16 guards, or it could have been as many as 30 to 32 guards that was set there to watch this particular gravesite, just to make sure that nobody could slip in and get the body of Jesus out of that tomb. Now, I want you to think about it, 15 or 16 Roman guards. Roman guards are Roman soldiers. They were a tough bunch. They were trained to be killers, actually. They knew how to fight. They knew how to take orders. They knew how to obey orders. The penalty for allowing a prisoner to escape was the death of the soldier on guard. In this case, if the body of Jesus disappeared, whether it was 15 or 16 or 30 to 32 soldiers, they would have been put to death because his body was there no longer. Think of the seriousness of the circumstance. This is real life. It's not a fairy tale in the past history. It's history. It's the way things were and the way things were done. So this was the charge of those soldiers. Make sure nobody touches that body. There were government records kept because the government now is involved. What does that mean? The government had a record of where Jesus' body was buried. They would have a little map, just like we do today. They would have a little map showing the exact place, the exact tomb that his body was put in. Well, why am I making such a big deal out of that? It's because his burial spot could not have been unknown. There were records that were written. All you had to do was pull the records and go find that particular burial site. So there was no such thing as an unknown tomb that Jesus was buried in. It was very well known. Not only did the government have records on it, you got all these people that knew where he was buried because they sit there and they looked at a rock for 3 days. An unpleasant job, I'm sure. But they did. The location of his tomb was well documented. And let's think about it. Jesus was a very popular man. Everybody knew what took place. I mean, he was a hero up till this past Friday. And then on Friday, all of a sudden, he became the scum of the earth. But everybody that lived in Jerusalem knew the name Jesus of Nazareth. They knew that he was put to death on a cross. Most of them probably went out there and watched it. And they knew where he was buried. It was their town. It's where they lived. I know where my mother and father are buried. I know where my grandfather is buried. And there's several people here that probably know my parents' location as well, just like I know your family's location. People would have known where Jesus was buried. It's kind of a foolish notion, really, that his burial site could have been unknown. Secondly, did the Lord's enemies steal his body? Did the Jews take it? Well, why would they? In Acts chapter 2, verses 29 through 32, read just a moment ago, Peter said, "Men and brethren, let me speak freely to you of the patriarch David, King David from 900 years ago, at that time, that he is both dead and buried. And his tomb is with us even to this day." They knew where David was buried. There was probably a big rock there. King David is buried here. Everybody knew where he was buried. They knew that his body was still in the ground. Well, having raised that, Peter wants to address a question. Therefore, being a prophet, David was a prophet, knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him that of the fruit of his body, one of his descendants, according to the flesh, he would raise up the Christ to sit on his throne. Now look, David's buried right here, and we all know it. And God made a promise to David that there was going to be someone raised from the dead. Why is that important to this crowd? They thought David was talking about himself. And Peter's, in essence, saying, no, that's not the case. His burial spot's still here. His body's still in the tomb. He couldn't have been talking about himself. Well, who would he have been talking about? He's talking about one of his descendants. One of his descendants was going to be known as the Messiah that Moses spoke of. The Messiah was going to come through the lineage of David. And when he did, he was going to sit on his throne. He, David, foreseeing this, knowing that this was going to happen, he spoke concerning the resurrection of the Christ. Not his own resurrection, but the resurrection of one of his descendants. That's what David was talking about. That his soul was not left in Hades. Hades is the place where God keeps spirits out of their bodies. Oh, I got to do this fast, okay, so hold on. When we die, our bodies go into the ground. Dust returns to the dust. The spirit goes back to the God who gave it. The $64,000 question is, where does God keep the spirit? Well, he keeps the spirit in a place called Hades. Hades is a place made up of 3 compartments. There's a place of torment, much like hell, but not a hell. There's a paradise place, a place where a person could celebrate a reward, perhaps even heaven itself. And then there was a great gulf that divided the 2 places, so that people in torment could not go to heaven, and people in heaven could not go to torment. This is what is Hades. His soul, Jesus' soul, and the thief, when he died, their souls went to this place Jesus called paradise. And Peter is saying, through the prophet David, that his soul was not going to be left there. What does that mean? He's coming back. His soul would go to paradise, but his soul was going to come back. The thieves wouldn't come back, but the Lord's would come back. Nor did his flesh see corruption. His body was in the ground for such a short period of time, it didn't even decay. It was only in the ground for a portion of 3 days. And then his body came back, a resurrected body, a spiritual body, an incorruptible body, a body that would never be destroyed. His spirit was reunited in that particular body. His soul did not, his flesh rather, did not see corruption. This Jesus God is raised up, of which we are all witnesses. This is what everybody was looking for. A Messiah who was going to be raised from the dead, who was a descendant of David. And Peter's affirming as much. This is what we're preaching. This is what we're telling you has happened. Number 3, did Jesus' disciples hide his body? Why would they? Well, they're going to be famous if they hide his body. Well, they became famous, but they didn't want to be famous. Well, they're going to become rich if they can go around preaching about the resurrection of the dead. No, they didn't become rich. Their preaching mostly was very poor people who had no hope. They preached a lot to prostitutes, to thieves. They preached to murderers. They preached to people who had nothing to give. How could they possibly be preaching for money? There was no money to be had. Why would they possibly steal the body of the Son of God? In Matthew 28, verses 11 through 15, we're told while they were going, this is to the disciples, behold, some of the guard went into the city. They told the chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers. Now the soldiers, they were in trouble. A corpse escaped on their watch. The sentence for that is going to be death. They've got no way to get out of it unless these Jewish authorities have enough power with Pilate to convince Pilate not to put him to death. To sweeten the pot, they offered him money. We want you to go and tell Pilate that their disciples stole the body while you were asleep. And if he gets upset, don't worry about it. Don't worry. We'll take care of Pilate. He won't bother you. He said, tell the people his disciples came by night, stole them away while they were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him. Maybe they'll bribe him or whatever, and we'll keep you out of trouble. So they took the money. They did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. Now, the book of Matthew was probably written somewhere between 55 and 60 A.D. Matthew said that this tale, that the disciples stole the body of Jesus, this tale is still being told to this day. 35, 40 years has gone by, and they're still telling the same tale they told on the day when he was gone from the tomb. Well, let's think about it. Tell the people his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. Let's say there's 15 soldiers. 15 soldiers sitting there guarding a grave. While we were asleep, we saw the disciples steal the body. If they were asleep, how could they see the disciples steal the body? That's one of the weakest stories I've ever heard. It was so weak that people would actually believe it. It's like a lot of things that go on today, things that you can't believe. Look what goes on in our government. Right now, half of Congress is fighting to get MS-13 gang leaders out of an El Salvadorian prison and back into our country. And the other half is fighting, trying to keep them down there. One part of Congress wants these criminals to be in our country. I don't know why. And the other half wants the criminals out of our country. People are very fickle. It's hard to understand why people do, what they want, what they believe. But one thing I learned a long time ago, and I'm getting on up there now, most of the time, people believe what they want to believe. It doesn't have to be based on fact. As many a time, it just flies in the face of fact. People won't believe something they don't want to be true. They believe the other thing. Even though there may be evidence, it doesn't matter. People tend to believe what they want to believe. This is one of the silliest things I've ever read in my life. While we were sleeping, we saw the disciples steal the body of Jesus. Hey, Pilate bought it. So what, right? His story's weak. It's weak as water. Did Jesus' disciples hide the body? According to Alfred Edersheim in the Life and Times of Jesus Messiah, he speaks about Justin Martyr, who lived AD 165. Regarding this particular statement, tell the people his disciples came by night and stole them away while we were asleep. Justin Martyr said, or he referred to it, I should say, in a document he produced called Dialogue with Trifle, and he also produced another document, Todath Jesu. In other words, the body of Jesus had still not been found. This is 165 AD. This is about 135 years after it happened. and no one was able to turn up the body of Jesus. No one. The Romans didn't, the Jews didn't, the disciples didn't. How can that be? Jesus' disciples had no reason to hide the Lord's body. As I mentioned a moment ago, they didn't live a life of luxury like some may suppose. First of all, they didn't anticipate a resurrection. When Jesus was raised from the dead, they were the first ones that didn't believe it. Some women told them that they had been raised from the dead. They didn't believe it. They talked like foolish women. No such thing as a man coming back from the dead. Well, Jesus taught them that. Well, they might have thought he was talking about it figuratively. He talked figuratively sometimes. Maybe that's what he was talking about. But they didn't believe that he came back from the dead. Why would they say that he did? They didn't believe it in the first place. How could they have gotten past the guards? You can't get past that many guards. That many guards are not going to be asleep. That many guards are not going to put their guard down because they know what the penalty of sleeping is. They would have had a commanding officer there who wouldn't have let them go to sleep because they would have put in stocks if nothing else. Those guards didn't go to sleep. There was only one way into a sepulcher. Sepulcher is just a big rock that's been hewn out in the center. Somebody went in there and blasted out the center of the rock. They roll a big old rock in front of it, and they put a body in there, and they call it a gravesite. Kind of like the mausoleums we got up here in town now, except they were single mausoleums. That's where he was buried. There was no way to get into that tomb. What would motivate them to preach a resurrection that didn't take place? What could they hope to gain from the lie? I already said there was no money, there was no fame. And there's one more thing that you want to keep in mind. They were murdered because they believed Jesus was raised from the dead. Out of the 12 apostles, there's records of 11 of them being murdered by unbelievers, let's say. You know, people, they'll lie for money. People will die for a lie. We see these Muslim terrorists strap bombs on themselves and go into a building and blow themselves up because they believe it's the will of Allah. They believe that once they're blown up, they're going to go to paradise and they're going to be given 72 virgins. They believe there's something better awaiting them on the other side of the explosion. People die for a lie as long as they believe the lie to be true. But there's one thing that people don't die for. They don't die for a lie that they know is a lie. Name anyone that's ever done that. Any person that's died for a lie knowing it was a lie. You won't find that person. That cost is too high. If somebody gave you money, what good's it going to do? You're dead. If somebody gave you fame, what good would it do? You're dead. There's no value, there's no profit whatsoever to dying for a lie, and people just don't do it. The disciples wouldn't have done it. There was no reason. Well, why on earth did they preach the resurrection of Jesus Christ? It's because they knew. They knew he rose from the dead. They knew that they were going to rise from the dead. They knew that their families would one day rise from the dead. And knowing that the resurrection was a part of God's plan for his kingdom, these men remained faithful in the face of adversity. They were tormented, persecuted, put in prison, beaten, and finally murdered because they knew it was true. Not because they knew it was a lie. That doesn't make sense. It's illogical. Many witnessed the resurrection of Jesus, many people. Acts chapter 1 and verse 3, Dr. Luke said, Jesus presented himself alive to them, his apostles, after his suffering by many proofs, appearing to them for 40 days, speaking about the kingdom of God. The word proof, according to Alexander in his commentary on the Acts, denotes the strongest proof of which a subject is susceptible. The strongest proof that can be offered in defense of an argument. These were the kind of proofs that were presented by Jesus. Mary Magdalene met him at the tomb. A group of women disciples met him at the tomb. Peter met him on the resurrection day. 2 disciples met him on the road to Emmaus. And 10 apostles, Thomas wasn't there, met him on the evening of the resurrection. 11 disciples met him a week later, on Sunday a week later, because Thomas was present. 7 disciples met him by the Sea of Tiberias. More than 500 people, most of whom were still alive when Paul wrote the 1 Corinthian epistle, which was 30 years after the resurrection. 500 people had seen Jesus, and they were still alive 30 years after the event took place. Why does he say that? Well, if you want to go ask them, go ask them. They're still living. If you want to have a witness, go talk to them. It might be your grandfather. It might be your great uncle. It might be your next door neighbor. Ask me for a name. I'll give you a name. You can go ask them. Was that tomb really empty, or is it all a lie? They were witnesses. They could testify. James was a witness, 1 Corinthians 15:7. This is probably the Lord's half-brother. He didn't believe in Jesus. He didn't believe Jesus was Messiah. But after Jesus came back from the dead, all of a sudden James became a believer. He's seen the miracles Jesus did. It didn't move him, not at all. But when that tomb was empty, James knew his half-brother actually did come up from the grave. 11 disciples met him on a mountain in Galilee, and to them he gave the Great Commission. His disciples were there on the Mount of Olives just prior to his ascension to heaven. Stephen, his first martyr, got to see him. As he was dying, he looked up into the heavens and he seen Jesus standing on the right hand of the Father. Paul, at least 3 times, he saw Jesus on the Damascus highway. He prayed to Jesus and saw him in the temple. And while he was in a prison in Caesarea, he prayed and saw the Lord Jesus Christ. The Lord appeared to John on the Isle of Patmos. This was 60 years after Jesus had been raised from the grave. He came back one last time, and he seen John the Apostle when he was imprisoned. Are the witnesses credible? Look at them. They're reasonably intelligent people. Are they fools? Are they hysterics? Were they honest individuals, people of worthy character? You have to check the records to find that out. And you can find out. Simon Greenleaf, considered the most intelligent man that ever lived when it comes to law procedures, witnesses, and things of that nature. He served as Royal Professor of Law at Harvard. Later, he served as Dame Professor of Law at Harvard. His books are still studied today by law students, not just at Harvard, but all across the country. He's got one of the keenest, most analytical minds known. And everybody, all lawyers, stand up and salute Greenleaf when they get an opportunity. In 1852, he wrote his treatise on the law of evidence, which is still considered the greatest single authority on evidence in the entire literature of legal procedure. It's still used in court cases even today. His writings have never been surpassed. In 1847, he wrote a document, an examination of the testimony of the 4 evangelists by the rules of evidence administered in courts of justice. How did they fare as witnesses to the resurrection? He said it's impossible that they, that is the apostles, It is impossible that they could have persisted in affirming the truths they have narrated had not Jesus actually risen from the dead, and had they not known this fact as certainly as they knew any other fact. I've just given you one small bit of evidence attesting to the resurrection of Jesus Christ on a day right about now, nearly 2,000 years ago, short about 5 years, 1995 years ago. One bit. And it's just the hem of the garment. There is so much more evidence. It's mind-boggling what's available. Smith touches on this some more in chapter 8 of his book, and Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. We got that book over here in the library. We got a few of them. It's worth reading. It's worth buying. I've got a couple at home if we come up short. There's too much to consider today. Too much. That's the problem with evidences. There's too much evidence. Boy, that sounds like a strange thing to say, doesn't it? There is so much evidence we could study it for 6 months. And I'm serious, it's a heart attack. Men have been dragging up evidence for 2,000 years about Jesus. And it's all there. The importance of the resurrection, very quickly. There are tiny clues. I'm going to stop here. There are tiny clues that cause us to raise big questions. Now, there are thousands of these little clues, okay? Thousands of these little clues in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All four of them wrote about the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Last week, I think, we looked at the amount of information available regarding the Passion Week of the Christ. There's 29 chapters, actually, that deal with the Passion of the Christ. All four of these men wrote about it, and they named the witnesses that were present at certain times. Well, there was one time when all four evangelists named three particular women. One was Mary, the mother of our Lord. The other was Mary, the mother of James. And then there was Salome. 3 witnesses to the resurrection. Well, so what? What does that mean? If the apostles were fabricating the tale of the resurrection, would they put in useless information that meant nothing to anyone? Would they put in information that's going to be rejected? Why would they put in the witness of women? It wouldn't do any good. Nobody's going to pay any attention to it. They're women. And nobody listens to women. Professor R.B. Edwards of Aberdeen University, he wrote, in Jewish law, the witness of women was not admissible. A slave was, but not a woman. A woman couldn't go to court and be a witness. A woman couldn't go to court and testify to anything. No one wanted to listen to a woman. She's a woman. And you don't listen to women. Here's my question to you. Why would the apostles, if they fabricated the event, why would the apostles have used women as witnesses? It makes no sense. Unless it was true. Jesus needed a donkey. He sent 2 of his disciples and he said to them, go into the city and a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him. Notice he said a man will meet you. Look how specific the details are. When you go into a city, there's going to be a guy with a donkey, and he's going to be coming towards you. He don't know you, and you don't know him. But I know that he'll be coming towards you when you meet him. Well, that was impressive. But notice also that this man is going to be carrying a pitcher of water. Now that is strange. Why is that? Men don't carry water. Oh, men will carry a water bottle. Men will have a sack out of skin on a rope around their neck. We call them canteens today. Men will have that and carry that. But a pitcher of water, a bucket of water, it won't happen. Not in the Jewish land. Men didn't do stuff like that. In Joshua chapter 9, verses 3 through 27, the Gibeonites living in Israel had deceived Joshua and the Israelites. Joshua was angry. And for their punishment, he decided that the Gibeonites were going to have to cut wood and fetch water for the Jews. Well, he got off light, didn't they? Oh, not really. Chopping wood wasn't bad, but fetching water? That was women's work. That was humiliating. That would shame them beyond belief. They would rather have been beaten than have to fetch water. So why was this man carrying water that day? Thousands of incidentals you can find in the New Testament. It's wonderful to study these things, to look for all these little bitty clues, because they're smattered all over the place. They're not the kind of mistakes that frauds would make. They're the kind of things that men would write, only because they're inspired by God to do so. And they did. I don't think women should carry the water. I carry my own water. I carry my water to my be your baby. I don't think she's lesser than me. Smile, women. I'm telling you how it was, not what I think. There's a lot of proof, a lot of evidences that Jesus raised from the dead. I hope you further your studies by studying more. A lot of information out there. A lot of information. Take advantage of it. See what's there to be offered. If you're not a Christian person, you are to believe Jesus, repent of your sins, be immersed in water for forgiveness of sin. If you are a child of God and something's got off balance, we'll pray with you if you want us to. You can pray by yourself, however you want to do it. But you need to make it right. Make sure you're walking with the Lord, not against him.